All day, there have been events happening in the Caribbean that no one is talking about. And I think they're trying to stop a panic. But guys, you need to know this. I talked earlier this morning about the events that have happened very recently in Puerto Rico. All day, there have been earthquakes and aftershocks, almost nonstop, some larger than others. However, in my video from earlier this morning, I talked about how this is all one plate. This is all one region. This same area was what brought us the huge earthquake in Haiti that literally destroyed the entire country. I talked about the threat to the Panama Canal and how if there were to be any kind of a hiccup or a problem, the threat to shipping, the threat to the economy of the United States would be almost irreparable within a week. Well, almost like clockwork, 4 hours ago, a major earthquake hit Nicaragua, just north of the canal. So this whole region now is starting to activate. And let's go to that information real quick. This is globalincidentmap.com, just like it sounds. You can type in quakes, Quakes global, global, incident, incident, map.com, quakes.globalincidentmap.com, and you can get this map for yourself, and it'll show you up-to-date, real-time information on earthquakes around the world. 4 hours ago, 5.2 magnitude, Nicaragua. There's not a single article out about this. And if you zoom in on Puerto Rico, you can see that nearly half or more of all of the earthquakes that have happened in the Western Hemisphere have happened here. Now, I know everybody talks about the New Madrid, and everybody talks about the West Coast. The West Coast would be terrible. That would be a horrible thing, but we would be able to get help over there. The vast majority of the population of this country lives on the East Coast, east of the Mississippi. If the New Madrid were to let go, we could have help come from both directions to the Midwest. If something happens and it damages the Panama Canal, or they shut operations for 2 weeks, the cascade effect to the economy will be unfixable. You will not be able to get enough help, repair crews into the region fast enough to fix it. And there's a lot of different things. People think about just the locks. So much more. So much more is involved in the operation of that canal than just the locks. Now, this is a picture of that Caribbean plate that has all of a sudden become very active. You see this line here, this black one that says Enriquillo Fault? This is exactly where an earthquake hit 4 hours ago. I put out a video, what was it, 5:30 this morning, it's 7 o'clock now, so 13, 14 hours ago talking about this. And like clockwork, it happened. And here is a verifying website. This is earthquaketrack.com that shows all of the earthquakes that have hit in the last month off the west coast of Nicaragua. So it's not just Puerto Rico now, it's Puerto Rico and Nicaragua. And they range 5.2, 4.1, 5.5, 4.7, 4.6. This whole thing is lighting up. Now, these aren't huge, these aren't devastating, but it's an indicator. And 6 months ago, a very significant earthquake hit very near to the Panama Canal. We covered this earlier today. I want to cover something real quick. A lot of you are following this, but they're doing the reporting in UTC time. Now, UTC is weird. You've heard the military talk about Zulu time or Charlie time, or they use the alphabetic indicator. Starting just off the east coast of Great Britain, that's Zulu time. Okay, so it starts at Z, not A. And going eastward across Europe, Zulu, it goes Alpha Bravo, Charlie Delta, Echo Foxtrot, all the way up to Mike time, which is just off the eastern coast of very eastern Russia. Now, instead of continuing over here across the international date line, November time starts just west of that line in Great Britain. So you have to come back over here and start November counting westward toward the East Coast. November, Oscar, Papa, Quebec, Romeo, Sarah, Tango, Uniform, Victor, Whiskey, X-Ray going west across the Western Hemisphere. So why do I say that? Why is it important? Okay, Puerto Rico is actually an hour ahead of the East Coast. It's one of these weird little places, the Dominican, Puerto Rico, all these little islands, parts of extreme eastern Venezuela, Guyana, this red that you're seeing right here. They are on UTC -4. East Coast is UTC -5. And if I'm reading this right, they are on Quebec time. So, I just want you guys to know that if you see times being reported for the earthquakes in Puerto Rico, and you're assuming it's Eastern time, you're wrong. Some people are going to be like, wait a minute, that time hasn't come yet. How can they know about that earthquake? It's not even that time yet. That's proof that they are constructing it. No. They're just an hour ahead of East Coast time in this very weird little time zone that very, very, very few countries are on. In fact, I think the only entire country that's on it is Bolivia. Bolivia, Dominican, Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, so I guess that would be 2. Now, those of you also talking about, why can't we just ship stuff to the West Coast and then rail it across the United States? There is not the infrastructure, there is not the people, there's not the spare capacity. The amount of stuff coming through the East Coast, forget everything going to Europe. And that's why I brought up this map. It would be devastating to the world economy. In a matter of days, weeks, it's over. To try to shift everything down around here, I mean, they would have to. It wouldn't be an option. They would have to keep it moving. But the cost involved, the time that it would take, would be just beyond anything that could be absorbed. You see, it's not just the movement of the goods. It's the movement of the goods in a way that is cost effective, that can be predicted. And with something like this happening, the amount of consumption that goes on east of the Mississippi, it's just not reality that you would be able to absorb. You might be able to absorb some of it, but it would cause all sorts of hiccups and problems. And hiccups is a nice word. It would cause a catastrophic collapse of the system. Some of these tankers aren't even equipped with the fuel to go this far. They'd have to find some place and refuel. Also, and just to cover this, 118 million people live on the East Coast that have about 3 days worth of goods, maybe 5. Now, one of the things people aren't talking about, they have been recently pulling these giant bombs basically through the canal every day. This is what they call an LNG tanker. LNG stands for liquid natural gas. And these are just giant freaking bombs. And this shows you the amount of clearance that this tanker right here isn't at dock. This is how much clearance there is between the side of the tanker and the sides of the canal. It is a tiny, tiny, tiny area. And if there were to be an earthquake and one of these things there would be a collapse, a catastrophic collapse of the water level, where this thing would hit the bottom of the lock or go sideways in here, or it would crack. The explosion, the crater, would be something you could see from space. It would be huge. If one of these things were to let go in the canal, there would be no fixing it. Here's a better picture to show you how big these, what they call Neo-Panamax containers, the new side of the canal. There's a big difference. The old canal used to have these tiny little locomotives on the side, and they would attach cables, and as the ship would come in, these railed locomotives would just pull straight through, and they would pull the giant ship through. Not these. They have these massive, massive tugboats that guide these things, and guys, you can't make this stuff up. The biggest ones, the ones they need to maneuver the LNG tankers, are only operated by one country. Guess what that country is? Venezuela. Yep, that's right. These big tugs that are made by Damon are run by PDVSA. That's the state-run oil company of Venezuela. This was something I talked about a long time ago during the collapse, when it was first starting to happen, when DC and Saudi Arabia were attacking. I said, if somebody gets a burr in the wrong place about what's happening in Venezuela, and you have all of these Venezuelan crews operating these tugs, they could shut the canal just to be obstinate and, that way about it, so to speak. The DC is going to punish us, we're going to punish them, kind of thing. And you can look this up. It's a very obscure piece of information. You can't just go slap any old tugboat on these giant LNG tankers and pull them through the canal. They had a huge problem when this first started. When they were first starting to try to pull these things through, they weren't meeting anywhere near their quota. There would be days go by they wouldn't even have one make it, because it is so difficult, so technical. The ability to deal with the currents, because there's no room for error, guys. There is no room for error with these things. They are enormous vessels, they are very heavy, and the amount of damage they could do just with a little tiny misdirection would be catastrophic. That's why they would say, look, if we can't guarantee we're doing this 100% safely, we're not even going to try. Now, they have somewhat fixed the problems, and they move these things through. But if an earthquake were to hit this region, and you couldn't get people to the site to work, or there were some problem with the lake where it was draining the wrong way, or the currents were the wrong way, or there was a ship in the wrong place at the wrong time, at the wrong lock when it hit, and the locks got damaged, there are 100 things that could go wrong. It's like Fukushima. You see, they didn't count on the seawalls protecting that to be on ground that was going to drop 15 feet. Which is exactly what happened. The walls protecting the nuclear reactor completely collapsed. It wasn't the walls that collapsed, it was the ground underneath them. Something like that happens here, it's done. And there's no fixing it. It's a very delicate dance that goes on down there, and it's been somewhat stable for a long time. But that's ending, and now we're starting to see the what they call the Caribbean plate start to let go. Nicaragua, this is not far. All of these different things you see go from 5 hours ago all the way back to 26 days ago. And like I said, 5.2 is not huge, but when you couple it with a 5.2, a 4.1, a 5.5, a 4.6, a 4.3, all in the last week, 2 weeks. You remember what happened in Haiti? What we're seeing now in Puerto Rico? The next stop is Panama. So, if you aren't stocked up on goods and you live on the East Coast, you need to be. And there's been some earthquakes out west here. The red just has to do with, the red versus orange is how recent. Let me zoom in here just to show you what I'm talking about. A lot of us would think that red would mean worse. In this particular case, the size of the circle has to do with the size of the earthquake. The color is how recent. So when we go here to Puerto Rico and we look, and we'll zoom in here, you can see how many have hit. I mean, if this doesn't qualify as a swarm, I don't know what does. But the red, 33 minutes ago, but it's smaller. This one, 4.5, 5 hours ago. So when you look at this map, the size of the dot is the size of the earthquake. The color of the dot is how recent it is. So, anyway, pray for these people. And be prepared, guys. Like, share, subscribe.